You ever get that feeling like you're just constantly reacting, like life and work just keep throwing things at you nonstop, and you're just scrambling?
Oh, absolutely. Treading water.
Yeah, exactly. It can
Hmm.
feel totally chaotic. But what if? What if that chaos isn't just random? What if it's actually, a result of how all the different pieces of our lives and work connect?
Hmm.
Or maybe how they don't connect properly?
That feeling, that overwhelm, it's so common, isn't it? And it's actually a perfect way into what we're exploring today. We're looking at ideas from the book Work the System.
Right.
And for you listening right now, these ideas aren't just like abstract theories. They offer a really practical way to maybe get some control back when you feel like you're just putting out fires all day.
Exactly. So our mission, our goal in this deep dive is to pull out the key insights from this book. We want to help you understand how you can shift from that constant firefighting mode
Hmm.
to actually managing the mechanics underneath it all. Your life, your work. Think of it like moving from reaction to, well, proactive control.
And I'm here to help unpack some of that and maybe offer a bit of a broader perspective on how these ideas fit together.
Great.
So, what's really striking right from the get go in this book is this core idea. Life, both personal and professional, it's basically a system of systems.
Okay, like what?
Well, think about your body, right?
Yeah.
Loads of different organs all working together, ideally, or an airplane, so many complex parts all needing to function for flight, even a city,
Yeah.
a whole network of services.
Okay, I see.
And the author points out when things feel chaotic, it's usually not some random bad luck. It's often because some of those individual systems within the bigger picture, they just aren't working as well as they could be. They're dysfunctional.
Okay, let's dig into that with the author's own story. He had this big aha moment, didn't he?
He did, yeah. He realized the chaos in his own business wasn't really about external factors or just bad luck hitting him. It was because he was constantly reacting to symptoms, problems popping up like,
Macklemore.
exactly like whack-a-mole. And instead of just hitting those individual crises, he figured out he needed to go deeper, fix the root causes, fix the actual systems generating those problems in his business.
That's a huge shift in thinking, isn't it? Going from symptom to cause.
It really is. And what's, quite compelling about his story is the result. The turnaround was dramatic. He went from working these insane 100-hour weeks, which sadly a lot of people can relate to,
Yeah, too many.
down to just a couple hours a week. And get this, his income actually went up.
Wow. Seriously.
Seriously. And he insists it wasn't luck. It was a direct result of focusing really intentionally on understanding and then managing those basic systems. It speaks right to that thing we all want, doesn't it? Achieving more, but working less.
Definitely. Now, the book also briefly touches on how we approach well-being, mentioning a couple of psychological viewpoints.
Yeah, it does a quick contrast. It mentions like the Freudian approach focused on the past versus a cognitive approach, which is much more about the present.
And the book leans towards the cognitive one.
Clearly, yeah. It really emphasizes this idea that what we do today will determine our tomorrow.
Hmm.
And that's powerful for you listening because it puts the control back in your hands, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
It's all about taking actions right now in your thinking and your behavior to shape a better future, not just feeling stuck because of things that happened way back when.
So it's about taking charge,
Yeah.
or maybe focusing on what we can take charge of. The book talks about our circle of influence.
Yes. This is such a practical, crucial concept. The author really pushes you to direct your energy towards the systems that are actually within your personal circle of influence.
The stuff you can actually change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The things you have real power to impact, which is, the opposite of spending all your time and mental energy worrying about huge global issues that feel completely out of your control.
Which just makes you feel powerless, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Helpless, frustrated. But what's interesting is the idea that by actively working on and improving what's inside your immediate sphere, that circle can actually start to get bigger over time.
Huh. Okay, this next idea really made me stop and think. The book kind of questions this idea of a perfect static now. He uses Woodstock as an example.
Yeah, that Woodstock story is pretty vivid. He uses it to show that life isn't some perfect snapshot we hold in our heads. The reality he experienced there was, well, far from the romantic image.
Right, mud in chaos problem.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So instead, he emphasizes life is more like a continuous streaming video. It's always moving, always changing.
Okay.
So understanding the underlying mechanics, those systems we're talking about, that becomes really vital if you want to engage effectively with that constant flow, rather than being stuck chasing some unrealistic ideal or, getting lost in nostalgia. For someone listening who really wants to understand things deeply, this idea of a dynamic reality driven by systems is key. It moves you beyond just looking at the surface.
So instead of just reacting all the time, which the book calls fire killing,
Yeah.
there's a more deliberate approach. System improvement. What does that actually look like?
Right. So system improvement, the way the author describes it, it's a very conscious, ongoing process. You're actively looking for parts of your systems, could be work systems, personal systems that aren't quite working right,
Finding the weak spots.
finding the weak spots, fixing them, and then this is really important, documenting how the improved system works, writing it down.
Why is the documentation so critical?
Because that documentation, especially in a business, ensures the system will keep working correctly and consistently, even if different people are doing the job later on. It makes the fix permanent, not just temporary.
And that's the complete opposite of fire killing, which we mentioned, just running from one crisis to the next. The author even admits he used to be a fire killer extraordinaire.
Yeah, he did.
But he realized he was just spinning my wheels and headed for destruction. That's a strong statement. It probably hits home for anyone who feels constantly busy, but like they're not actually getting anywhere.
It really does. Because, putting out fires feels urgent, it feels productive in the moment, but you never actually fix why the fires keep starting, so they just keep coming back again and again.
So then system management comes after improvement.
Exactly. That's the next level.
Yeah.
System management is about actively working to make those improved systems run as efficiently as possible. The goal is to prevent those recurring problems from ever happening again and ultimately free up more of your own time. That's the real payoff for you, the listener: less stress, more time.
Okay, this next concept was a bit of a head-scratcher for me at first. The idea that the world is already like 99.9% efficient, that seems optimistic.
It does sound counterintuitive, right? But the author asks you to just think about the huge number of systems that work perfectly fine around us every single day without us even noticing.
Like what?
Well, his example is electricity. Most of us rely on it constantly, right? And despite the incredible complexity of generating power, getting it to your house, it just works almost all the time.
Yeah, that's true. Usually.
Right. And his point is, when things do go wrong, a power outage, whatever, it's usually because a specific component within one of those massive systems has failed. It's not that the whole world is fundamentally chaotic or broken.
So it's a part failing, not the whole concept being flawed.
Exactly. And thinking this way, thinking that the world is mostly efficient, is really powerful when problems do pop up in your own life or work. Instead of feeling like everything's falling apart, you start looking for the specific broken part within the relevant system. It makes solving problems much more focused, much more manageable.
That actually makes a lot of sense. It reframes failure. So, okay, if we accept that systems can work efficiently, how do we start applying this? The book talks a lot about the power of why and this thing called the strategic objective.
Yes, this is fundamental. The author really stresses that you need a clear sense of purpose, the basic why behind what you're doing.
For your business or life.
Both, really. The strategic objective is a document, usually just one page, that clearly spells out this why. The author realized his own company, Centratel, just lacked a clear direction. That realization was the spark, the birth of this strategic objective document for him.
And what does having that do?
It gives you perspective. It lets you step back, get above the daily whirlwind, see the bigger picture. So going back to that feeling of treading water we started with, the strategic objective is like, it helps you choose which way to swim rather than just flailing around.
Okay, that makes sense. Direction. From there, the book talks about shifting how we see things from organic to mechanical. That sounds a bit, I don't know, cold, especially for life stuff.
Yeah, the wording might sound a bit stark, but the idea is about moving away from seeing your business or maybe even parts of your life as this totally unpredictable, organic thing that just grows randomly.
Like a weed.
Maybe. And instead, seeing it more like a mechanical system, something made up of distinct parts, components that you can actually manage and adjust.
And there's a process for this shift.
Yeah, he lays out a 3-step process for this kind of system improvement. First, isolate and expose the systems. Basically, figure out what the different systems actually are in your life or work. Define them clearly.
Okay. Step 1, identify.
Step 2, refine and perfect them. Tweak each system so it runs as efficiently and effectively as possible.
Step 2,
Improve. And step 3, document them. Write down exactly how the improved system works using what he calls working procedures. This makes sure they get executed consistently and correctly every time.
right, documentation again. So this leads us to the 3 core documents that are really central to this whole work the system method. Can you break those down for us?
Sure. These are the practical tools, the things you actually create. First is the strategic objective, which we just talked about. That concise one-page document outlining the overall direction, your why.
And the author says, what, 6-8 hours to create that leader's job?
Yeah, roughly. He sees it as the leader's core responsibility to define that. And his own company's example is super direct. We are the highest quality telephone answering service in the United States. Simple, clear.
Okay, number 1, strategic objective. What's the second one?
Second is the operating principles. Think of these as your guidelines for decision-making, your rules of the road.
Based on values.
Exactly. They reflect your core values, both personal and professional, and they help make sure everyone, if you have a team, is operating consistently. He gives an example from Centratel, Principle #8, which is about focusing on just a few services implemented in superb fashion. That principle guides their choices about what not to do as much as what to do.
Okay, so objective for direction, principles for decisions. What's the third one? The working procedures. These sound like the real nitty-gritty.
They absolutely are. Working procedures are the detailed, step-by-step instructions for doing specific tasks. The real how-to guides.
How detailed?
The goal is what he calls off-the-street clarity, meaning so clear that someone literally walking in off the street with no prior experience could read the procedure and do the task correctly.
Wow, that's really clear.
It is, and he emphasizes that every time you improve a system, the end result should be a new or updated working procedure documenting that improvement. His company, Centratel, apparently has around 300 of these.
300? That sounds like a ton of work to create.
It probably is, initially. But the argument, and his experience seems to back it up, is that the time invested in creating them pays back hugely in terms of saved time, reduced errors, and increased freedom down the road. That off-the-street clarity is the magic ingredient, really. It stops things from depending on one specific person's knowledge.
Okay, so you invest time up front to save way more time later. The book gives an example of this paying off at Centratel, right?
Yeah, a really compelling one. He talks about how implementing all these systems, the objective, the principles, and especially those detailed working procedures led to this dramatic jump in their service quality.
Yeah.
And huge growth.
Didn't they buy out competitors?
They did. All 3 of their local competitors within just a few years. He calls it a cycle of increasing returns. As you fix systems, things run smoother, which frees up time.
Which you can then use to fix more systems.
Exactly. It creates this positive feedback loop, this upward spiral of efficiency and improvement.
To make this less abstract, there's a really practical example in the book, a bill payer system. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, that's a great one because it's so relatable. He describes setting up a system for managing and paying bills. Manually, it used to take him like 15 hours every month.
15 hours just on bills. Ouch.
Right. So he invested the time to set up an electronic system, automate payments where possible, streamline the whole process. And he got that monthly task down to just 2 or 3 hours.
That's a huge saving.
Massive. And he directly asks you, the listener, to think about your own bill paying. How much time does it take you? Could systemizing it free up, say, 10 or 12 hours a month for you? It really makes you think about those recurring tasks differently.
Definitely. This idea of stepping back, taking that outside and slightly elevated viewpoint keeps coming up. Why is that perspective so important?
It seems absolutely key to the whole method. That detached observer view lets you actually see the systems clearly, analyze how they're working or not working. He uses his old job as an analogy, a project engineer for an electric utility.
Right, he wasn't climbing the poles himself.
Exactly. His job wasn't the day-to-day tasks. It was looking at the whole electricity distribution system, finding weak points, designing improvements, and then overseeing the implementation. That's the mindset he advocates for your own life and work. Get outside and slightly elevated so you can see the forest, not just the trees you're bumping into.
See the whole system, not just the immediate task.
Right. It lets you identify the problems you might miss when you're stuck down in the weeds and then design better ways of doing things.
The book uses a simple analogy for consistency, too. The bad kiosk coffee versus the reliable coffee shop.
Yeah, it's very relatable, isn't it? That frustration when you get a terrible coffee from some random place versus the comfort of knowing your regular spot will deliver a good cup every time.
Hmm.
And the point is that reliable quality, it doesn't just happen. It's the result of the coffee shop having solid, consistent systems and procedures in place. It shows why documenting those procedures matters. It leads to predictable, positive results. Good intentions aren't enough. You need the system.
Okay, now this next one feels a bit like permission to relax, the good enough principle. It sounds slightly counterintuitive.
It does, doesn't it? But it's really practical. The author argues that chasing absolute 100% perfection in everything can actually be a massive waste of time and energy. Often, the extra effort gives you very little extra value.
Like diminishing returns.
Exactly. He tells a story about a land surveying instructor whose team got fired because the party chief insisted on basically over-engineering the survey. He spent way too much time getting unnecessary precision and missed the deadline.
Ah, okay. So it's about finding the right balance.
Precisely. Balancing speed with the necessary level of accuracy for whatever you're doing. He even asks you, the listener, are there areas in your life where you're sweating the small stuff unnecessarily? Like maybe reconciling your checkbook down to the absolute last penny when being within a dollar or two is perfectly fine for your needs.
Hmm. Yeah, I can think of a few examples. But isn't there a danger there, like settling for just okay or mediocrity?
That's a fair question. And I think the distinction is crucial. It's not about accepting sloppy work or poor quality. It's about intelligently allocating your resources. Recognizing when perfect is the enemy of good, or more importantly, the enemy of done. Focus your perfectionism where it delivers real value, not everywhere.
I like it. The book also brings up something we might not even think of as mistakes. Errors of omission. What are those about?
Yeah, this is interesting. Errors of omission are the mistakes we make simply by not doing something, by failing to act.
Like what?
Well, common examples he gives are things like not finishing college, or not starting to save for retirement early enough, or maybe not making that apology you know you should make.
Things you don't do rather than things you do wrong.
Exactly. He links it to procrastination and also to lacking what he calls quiet courage, that inner strength to just do the necessary thing, even if it's uncomfortable or difficult.
And why are these important to think about?
Because these inactions, these omissions, can have really big negative consequences down the line, often bigger than small mistakes we make along the way. Becoming aware of them, acknowledging what you haven't done, is the first step. It prompts you to think, what am I putting off, and what's the real cost of that delay?
That's a challenging thought. Okay, shifting gears slightly. Point of sale thinking. That sounds like another practical strategy. How does that work?
It's pretty straightforward, actually. Point of sale thinking means dealing with tasks, decisions, details as soon as they come up, immediately. Like a cashier processes your purchase right there at the till.
Instead of letting things pile up.
Exactly. It helps prevent that backlog of stuff to do, all those little details that drain your mental energy. It helps you avoid falling back into that reactive fire-killing mode. He gives examples like, if you realize you need milk while you're already at the store, buy it then. Don't make a separate trip later. Handle it at the point of sale.
So deal with it now.
Deal with it now. The key idea is being proactive with incoming stuff to stop it from becoming a future problem or a time sink. It's important, though, he distinguishes this from multitasking, which he points out is usually inefficient for our brains. It's about efficiently processing single tasks as they arise.
Okay, clear distinction. Now, this next heading sounds quite blunt. Being cold-blooded, what really matters.
Yeah.
What's the idea here?
It is blunt, isn't it? But the message is powerful. He's basically urging you to take a really hard, critical, maybe even unemotional look at all your activities, work, personal life, everything, and then be ruthless about cutting out anything that doesn't genuinely add value or move you towards your strategic objective.
Eliminate the fluff.
Pretty much. He uses this great analogy from his slalom skiing days. He used to try and just power through the course, use brute force, but his times got way better when he stopped that and focused on being smooth and slow, making precise, effective movements instead of just flailing with effort.
So it's about effectiveness over just raw effort.
Exactly. Prioritize the actions that actually make a difference and have the courage to stop doing the things that don't, even if you've always done them.
The book even applies this systems thinking to our own bodies. Measuring your body.
Yeah, that's a fascinating perspective. He shares his own story of tackling some health issues. Instead of just accepting vague symptoms, he started viewing his body as a complex system: chemicals, processes, inputs,
It's
outputs.
like data-driven health.
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
He proactively sought out blood tests, gathered data, tried to understand the underlying mechanics of what was going on inside him. He encourages you, the listener, to think about your own health that way too. See it as a system you can monitor, understand, and proactively maintain rather than just reacting when something breaks.
That's definitely a different way to look at well-being. For listeners who run businesses or manage people, the book also talks about building a strong employment system. What are the highlights there?
He definitely sees employment as just another critical system to manage properly. The emphasis is on building a robust system for hiring and management rather than hoping to find some magical superstar employee who fixes everything.
So what does that system involve?
Key things are setting crystal clear expectations for every role, providing fair, even generous pay, and crucially, having really well documented procedures for everything, like a detailed employee handbook. He argues this structured approach attracts and keeps good, reliable people who fit the system, which is ultimately much more effective than constantly searching for that one elusive magic pill employee.
System over superstar. Makes sense. And naturally, communication is key in any system involving people. The importance of communication.
Absolutely essential. He frames effective communication itself as a vital system. At his company, Centratel, the focus wasn't just on the volume of communication, but more on the frequency, keeping those lines of communication open constantly.
Quantity over volume, in a way.
Sort of, yeah. Regular check-ins, clear updates, clarity is huge, obviously. And also, using the right medium for the message. Sometimes an email is fine, sometimes you need a call, sometimes face-to-face.
Choosing the right tool for the job.
Right. And he also briefly mentions these concepts of biological prime time, or BPT, that's basically figuring out when your personal energy levels are highest for doing focused, demanding work.
Your peak hours.
Exactly. And mechanical prime time, or MPT.
Hmm.
This is more for owners or managers consciously setting aside specific time slots purely for working on the business, doing those high-level strategic tasks, rather than getting sucked into the day-to-day operations. It's about leveraging your time to make more progress with less actual work.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. For someone listening right now, maybe feeling that overwhelm we started with, feeling inspired, but maybe a bit daunted. What's the crucial first step the book pushes for?
It's incredibly simple, actually. Very direct. He says, take a blank piece of paper right now and just write 2 words at the top: strategic objective.
That's it.
That's the first step. It's symbolic, of course, but it's also tangible. It's about moving immediately from just thinking about these ideas to actually starting the process of implementing them, taking that first concrete action.
Okay, so bring this all together then. If we were to summarize the core message from our deep dive into Work the System, what would it be?
I think the fundamental message is this: your life, your work, they aren't just random chaos. They are complex systems. And the really good news is that these systems can be understood, they can be managed, and most importantly, they can be improved deliberately.
Through this methodology.
Right. The Work the System approach gives you a framework using those 3 core documents: the strategic objective, the operating principles, and the working procedures. And it requires that big mental shift, doesn't it? From just reacting, from fire killing, to proactively improving the underlying systems that cause the problems in the first place.
And if there's one key takeaway you really want our listener to walk away with today, what is it?
The most crucial thing, I think, for you listening is to really grasp that by adopting this system's perspective, you genuinely can gain more control. You can reduce that stress, that feeling of being constantly overwhelmed. You can become way more efficient. And ultimately, you can achieve more of what you actually want, whether that's in your business, your career, or your personal life.
It's about shifting from victim of circumstance to architect.
That's a great way to put it. Becoming the deliberate architect of your own success, and maybe just as importantly, your own well-being.
Okay, finally then. As always, we like to leave our listeners with something to chew on. A final provocative thought. What have you got for us today?
All right, how about this? Now that you've got this glimpse into the mechanics, the systems running underneath your daily life and work, just take a moment and consider. What's one small system, maybe in your personal life, maybe at work, that you could start to examine and maybe improve even just a tiny bit starting today?
Just one.
Just one. Think about the potential ripple effect. How could fixing or improving that one small thing create more order, more efficiency, maybe even more fulfillment down the line. It might seem small, but those deliberate changes add up. And perhaps, digging deeper into the Work the System book itself might be a valuable next step on that journey.